I'm saying? Yeah. The fanatic. Where we keep it 100, keep it real. That's the only way we know how to be. Talking that sports talk. You know what I'm saying? Straight out of South Carolina. Upstate, A64. Yeah. The FANATTIC. The fanatic where we keep it OG. We talking sports, so I call what.
Welcome into the Fan Addict Sports Channel for sports fans by a sports fan. It's your boy Coach I. All right, man, we're in here for an Ohio State Notre Dame preview, and we got our guy Christian back, man, a Notre Dame fan, man. He already gave us a preview on the Notre Dame season. Now we get to break down what he thinks about the Ohio State game, man. What's going on, Christian?
Oh, hi. I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, man, good, man. Glad you came back in here to talk some ball. Talking season is just about over. We got about, 36 hours before kickoff on week 0. I'll be tuned into the Nebraska Northwestern game. I think Nebraska will be much improved this year. Maybe at least win like 7 or 8 games, doubling their total from last year. So I'm just ready for college football.
Absolutely. I mean, they were the best 9-loss team in college football history.
I mean, you losing like every game by less than 7. I mean, that's good, I guess, and bad that you can't finish games. So we'll see what they look like this year if they made any improvement. So, yeah. All right, man. Let's go ahead and jump into this one, man. This right here has a lot of playoff implications. Who do you think it hurts more if they lose?
I mean, I guess the obvious answer is Notre Dame because they don't have the conference championship to play for. But to be honest, depending on who loses, I think it still has a great shot of making it based on both of their schedules. You know, I know we kind of talked about it last time, but Notre Dame still has plenty of opportunities to play ranked opponents. Between Clemson, BYU, I mean, even USC. I mean, there could be some other teams that might sneak into the top 25. But you know, obviously, Ohio State has a really tough schedule as well, and always ends with that team up north, as they like to say, and then the conference championship game. So I think either way, win or lose, I think both teams still have a shot.
I'm with you. Notre Dame has shown that they can get in, with a loss. And like you said, if Ohio State loses to Notre Dame, then they can run the table in the Big Ten. And I think a one-loss Big Ten champ, if they win it, has a great chance to get in because I don't think there's going to be many undefeated teams this year. So I think, you got possible Alabama and or Georgia or Clemson, maybe Utah. I mean, but I don't see a lot of teams going undefeated. So this one loss, I don't think it hurts. I don't think it hurts overall. I think it'll drop you in the the coaches poll or whatever initially. But by the time this college football playoff poll comes out, I think both teams have enough games in between then to recover from a loss. Yeah, unless you get I don't know, maybe it'll hurt if one team gets blown out, maybe.
Yeah, that's like the only thing. Like honestly, as a Notre Dame fan, I'm haunted by big game blowouts. But thankfully, the guy who used to be the head coach was the one who was notorious for that, and he's no longer at Notre Dame. So.
Right, man. So, let's get into a breakdown of the game, man. Let's talk about Notre Dame's offense versus the much maligned Ohio State defense. We all know that Ohio State pretty much couldn't stop anybody last year, and Notre Dame was pretty good on offense. Notre Dame ended the season playing Oklahoma State in the Fiesta Bowl, and now Ohio State has Oklahoma State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. And I actually went back. I had watched it live when it came on, but I went back and watched it. You guys were able to do a lot of things in the middle of the field against Oklahoma State in that defense. And I know it's not the same players, but typically it's going to be the same scheme when a defensive coordinator, goes over to a school. How are you feeling about that matchup?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to start with the quarterback. So everybody should know by now that Tyler Buchner has been named starting quarterback, and for good reason. I mean, he showed plenty of flashes last year with his ability to both run and throw the ball. It's kind of funny because he's always been knocked for his accuracy, but people aren't really paying attention, I guess.
Yeah.
All the beat writers are coming out like, look, he's looking really sharp. Any of the clips you see come out, I mean, he's hitting some pretty nice balls, and it's Uh, he's going to make people look foolish when they see how accurate he really is. Um, so you mentioned Jim Knowles' defense. I think he typically runs a 4-2-5, and so
Hmm.
typically hitting those soft spots, underneath the safeties, behind the linebackers kind of area. Notre Dame actually has really good advantage there. I mean, obviously with Michael Mayer being, I guess the 1A or 1B, depending on who you argue with Brock Bowers for the best tight end in college football. Um, he's just a mismatch. Whether it's on a safety or a
Facts.
linebacker, it doesn't matter. He's really really good, and there's a reason why he's a projected first round pick. And then again, we saw Chris Tyree hit some really nice plays in that bowl game against Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
He's got some speed, but it's not just him back there. We also have Audric Estime. I know we kind of talked about him last time, but he's just a big, powerful back with really nimble feet. Uh,
Hmm.
I expect to see a lot from him. And same with Logan Diggs. He's just got some really good flash. Kyron Williams-esque, I guess, if you will, from last year. Um, but then I think one of the interesting battles is at receiver. Lorenzo Styles, I think, is going to be a wide receiver one. So
Me too.
what help can you get from his supporting cast between Braden Lindsey, Jaden Thomas, uh, Joe Wilkins Jr. Tobias Merriweather is a guy to keep an eye on. He's a really good freshman that Notre Dame picked up. Um, so we kind of talk about the offense and how can they exploit the defense. Um, Mainly, it's the is it limiting Zach Harrison and was it JT Tui Malawal?
Don't
Uh,
get me to try to pronounce it. I know you're talking
yeah,
about.
I like to challenge myself with names, but yeah. So those are the OSU edge rushers between Joe Alt and Blake Fisher. How do
And
they
they
stymie those two?
they
Th-
always
th-
keep an edge rusher, even if the defense isn't good.
yeah, it's crazy. But I mean, it's just Larry Black from OSU, and he's just pumping out talent. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, so how do the tackles stymie those edge rushers? The interior O line is actually pretty experienced. I think Notre Dame has a senior starting at guard, a sixth-year senior starting at the other guard spot, and then I believe Zeke Correll is the junior starting at center. So I mean
Hmm.
they should the Notre Dame offensive line is going to be really good this year. I think it's actually going to be in the running to win the Joe Moore Award. So I really don't think OSU's defensive line is going to cause too much trouble there. The two that I'm really looking out for, though, the safety was his name, uh, Ronnie Hickman. He's
Hmm.
he's going to anchor that secondary. He's a experienced player, playmaker back there. Denzel Burke at cornerback. He's younger, but he's same way. He's just a playmaker.
Yeah.
So we got to find a way to keep the ball away from them so they can't make that much of an impact on the game.
Yeah, I think Jim Knowles will make a lot of strides in that Ohio State defense, man. And with those young guys at secondary that you named, they'll be helped out by the pass rush. Like you say, you even if they don't get any sacks, it'll be a good task, a good challenge for that Notre Dame line to try to keep them off of Buckner. Now, what I want to ask about, like, how do you see the offense going? Because I mean, like I say, if we go back to the Oklahoma State game, just because that was the Jim Knowles defense, you guys are able to hit people from all three levels. You got Tyree, you got Mayer, you got Lorenzo Styles. In that game, Cohen threw for 509 yards and 5 touchdowns, and you guys only ran the ball 21 times for 42 yards. Do you see it being more balanced this year, or do you see more of Tyler Butler passing and Tyler Butler running?
Well, you're going to see both. I think in the big games, Tyler Buckner is just going to show off his dynamic playmaking ability because that's who he is. That's what he does. That's what makes him so good.
Yeah.
Um, And so the offensive line coach from last year, Jeff Quinn, he has been let go, uh, and it's been replaced by Harry Heastand, who you ask anybody and they'll tell you he's one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. He's
Hmm.
a disciple of Joe Moore, so that name should sound familiar because there's an
I
award
know.
named after him.
Right.
And the last time he was at Notre Dame, he did win the Joe Moore Award. And reports out of camp is all of the linemen are really taking into his teachings. So you'll see a much better push against defensive line when it comes to the run game. So that's going to help there. In the pass game, you mentioned it before. Tyler Buckner has that playmaking ability, has
Mm-hmm.
really good running ability. It's going to allow him to extend plays and to be able to hit the open receivers that are getting off coverage or finding those soft spots that we talked about earlier. So I think that it's really going to help them out a lot. And with Tommy Rees, I actually think that he's underrated as an offensive coordinator in some circles.
Okay.
He's actually really, really creative. Basically, he's been calling plays with one arm behind his back. With Notre Dame's previous coaches were not very good, not very helpful. Between the wide receiver coach and the offensive line coach that I already talked about, both those guys were let go.
Okay.
So we should see an uptick in wide receiver play and offensive line play to help the offense out.
Okay.
And especially with Ryan Kelly no longer being there, I think we're going to see more of what we saw from Tommy Rees in the bowl game, where he's not going to be afraid to just open it up and just use what works.
that he definitely did, and like you said, I think you will see a higher scoring average as a whole. Brian Kelly likes more of a pro style, set, like using the running backs, tight ends more. Still having good wide receivers, but like you said, alluding to that Oklahoma State game, definitely Cohen threw the ball. He was 38 for 68, so he threw the ball 68 times. And all of that wasn't because you guys were behind or whatever. That was just a plan of attack.
Yeah, and he was only sacked twice on all those dropbacks against the nation's number one pass rush. So if they can do that against the number one pass rush, I mean, I don't see why they can't hold up against Ohio State.
Yeah. So the question, at least for me, is not if you can score. To me, is when we flip to the other side with Ohio State's offense, Notre Dame's defense, is can you score as much as Ohio State can score? Because we know, regardless of who they play, mostly it's like they score a lot of points. That's normally how they beat you. It's not like they stymie you on offense and then they hold you to 7 points, unless you're like a Rutgers or somebody, but they just outscore you, which puts a lot of pressure on your offense every time they come out. It's like I tell people, sometimes a good offense can be your best defense. It's like if you score every time you get the ball, now that puts the pressure on the offensive staff for the other team to say, okay, now we got to score every time we get the ball. You guys were top 15 last year in defense and defensive scoring. You got a new coordinator though, so he knows a little bit about defense, Mr. Al Golden. So you guys do have an experienced secondary. You got Cam Hart, Clarence Lewis. You got the guy from Northwestern who could arguably be the best safety in the country. We'll see how all of that pans out. You got Isaiah, what is it, Foxy? Am I saying
Foskey.
it right? Foskey at edge. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and Brandon Joseph, the guy from Northwestern, had some experience from 2020 when he played against Ohio State in that Ryan Day offense in the shortened COVID season when they played him in the Big Ten championship. How are you feeling about y'all defense trying to stop Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., Smith and Jigba, Travion Henderson?
Weapons on top of weapons on top of weapons.
Right, right.
So the biggest thing is you can't stop them. I mean, there's just too many weapons. Like between Travion Henderson and you said all the ridiculous talent they have at wide receivers, starting with Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's more of how do you limit them? Can you shut down? Can you shut down one part of their game? Can you force them to, into red zone? Like this is actually how Oregon and Michigan were able to beat them last year. Is between the 20s, that's all you. You get as many yards as you want, but once you get into that red zone, you're not putting the ball in the end zone. Yep. And so how do you force them to kick field goals? So I think where it starts with is obviously you got to stop Travion Henderson. I think Freeman's been preaching it. I want to run the ball at will and I want to stop the run. That's his mindset. So they're going to stop Travion Henderson. That is their goal. I think that they have the defensive line, like you said, between Isaiah Foskey and at the other end, we call it the big end, is Riley Mills. He's just a monster of a man. And then we got some good younger players
Yeah.
playing on the interior. We actually picked up a, uh, a grad transfer in Chris Smith, who's just a space eater. That dude's massive too. And then our linebackers, how can they flow to the ball? I mean, we've not gonna lie. I think Notre Dame probably has one of the better linebacker units, just with the. I mean, there's young talent, but then there's experienced talent. I
Yeah.
think you're going to see a lot of Maris Leofau. The dude's another flying Hawaiian. He's just got the hair to go with it, and he's just all over the field. And then you got the proven commodities and Jack Kaiser, J.D. Bertrand. I think we'll see a lot of Prince Collie. He's a younger guy, but he's been tearing it up in camp. And then we'll actually see probably a freshman play and junior Tui Alamaka. He's
Good pronunciation.
Thanks. I've been practicing that one. No, he's going to be playing Mike linebacker, so he's all about just blowing up the run. And between him and Bo Bauer, I think that they'll do a good job of eating up that space. So then it comes to, like you said, this experienced secondary, and I think that people are kind of underrating it a little bit. Clarence Lewis had a really bad game against Oklahoma State. That's
Yeah.
to say it lightly. He was just getting picked on all game, and he's come back with a new mindset. He's really built up his confidence again. He was actually playing a position he wasn't supposed to be playing, so they're going to put him back in his original corner spot. Uh, and then Cam Hart obviously is the known commodity at corner. He's dependable. He's actually had the best. So last year he had a better season than Notre Dame's All-American cornerback and Julian Love had in
Yeah.
2018.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then obviously you talked about Brandon Joseph, and that guy is. They say that he's not as good as Kyle Hamilton, but he's a better leader and play or teammate on the defense. That's kind of the reports coming out of camp. I
Okay.
mean, you can't replace Kyle Hamilton.
That dude was
But
a
Brandon,
playmaker.
absolutely. But Brandon Joseph, he's a close second. So it's, how do they look on the other safety position? That's kind of key. So what can the secondary do to just keep everything in front of them? To limit what Smith Njigba, Egbuka, Harrison, Fleming,
Wide
these
receivers
wide
for
receivers.
days.
Oh my gosh, they're so talented. I mean, you can't say enough good things about the offense, but it's like I said before, you got to limit
Yeah.
them. Al Golden hasn't coached a defense since 2005, I think, but he is very defensive minded.
Yep.
He built a defense around his team, so I think that kind of works. Where he's not coming in with a scheme, but he looks at what he's got and he builds that defense around them. I think that's really going to benefit what Notre Dame can do.
Yeah, I think you made some good points, especially about how like you can't stop an offense like Ohio State. You have to try to limit them. If you go back and watch the Michigan game, Michigan didn't stop their pass. Michigan stopped their run. Michigan held Travion Henderson to 74 yards. They held Ohio State to a team 64 yards because they sacked Stroud 4 times. And in the game they made Stroud fumble, so they put some pressure on him and things like that. So I think you're right on the head with that. What I wonder is how quickly they take to Al Golden. Is Al Golden going to bring his own style in, or is he going to kind of try to fuse his style with Freeman? Because we know Freeman's a defensive guy as well. And is it going to be, because that's kind of how they do at Alabama. It's like you come in, you might be a good defensive coordinator, but you're going to run Nick Saban style. You know what I'm saying? So that could lead to some missteps with, Brandon Joseph being new to the team, period, and Al Golden, bringing in his take on what he thinks the defense should look like. So the question is, what do you think the game is going to look like, and what's your prediction?
Okay. So I think the game's going to be won in the trenches. So one thing that Oregon did and Michigan did against Ohio State is they physically beat them up in the trenches. And so that's been the mindset. Pretty much all camp is physically dominate your opponent. It's all about competing against the guy across from you, and it's all about winning. When they open up practices, every practice they have a competition, and so it's putting that into the culture, of who they want to be physically dominant, they want to be competitively dominant, and they want to just challenge everything. That's what the Freeman calls his golden standard.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be one there. Uh, what does Tyler Buckner do? What does he do? How does he play? Don't let the environment get too big for him. Limit those mistakes, but he has to make plays too. Against a team like Ohio State, he's going to make them. He's got to use his feet. How do you limit like we said, the OSU offense? I mean, C.J. Stroud, he's no slouch. I mean, he was a Heisman runner-up last year.
Probably gonna win it this year, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, just with his embarrassment riches we talked about, how do you make him uncomfortable? Do you get after him? Um, you know, Obviously we talked about stopping the run, and it goes both ways too. Um, I think that when you look at it as a whole, is you got to keep Ohio State under 30. You want to hear an interesting fact? I found this out. So Ohio State is 170-2, so won 170 times and have only lost twice when they've scored more than 30 points. And they have never lost when they have scored more than 35. So that's a tough task to ask, just because of how good their offense is. But I think that Notre Dame has enough key pieces in place, and we talked about Al Golden. I think he shaped his defense to his playmakers. And Freeman said that they have a similar defensive mindset, so there wasn't too much of Freeman saying, "Hey, put him here, do this or that." He's allowing Golden to, run the defense, and obviously Tommy Rees is going to be free to call his offense. So I think that we're going to see a hard-fought game both ways. We're going to see some explosive plays. We're going to see some really bone-crunching hits between the linebackers. I mean, what kind of names are better than like Tommy Eichenberg? That just sounds like a linebacker name. It's Steel Chambers. Are you kidding me? I mean, those are awesome names.
Yeah.
So I think we're just going to see a well-fought game in the shoe. It's going to be electric. It's going to be awesome. But I think Notre Dame's going to pull out the victory.
Okay, so Caesar's book has you guys as a 15.5-point underdog. So I don't think it's going to be like that. I do have Ohio State winning because it's in the shoe. If it was a neutral site, I probably would. If it was at Notre Dame, I think it would be like Notre Dame would have a better chance to win. It's hard to win in South Bend. I think I'm going to go with, because I don't know if anybody holds them under 30. So I'm going with, it's going to be more like a 38-26, 38-27 type deal, where I think, like I say, I don't know if Tyler Buckner is going to be as good as Jack Cohn in the passing game. I know he's an athlete and he can make plays with his feet. That takes time off the clock, takes away possessions from the team. So I think ultimately Ohio State, their offense has been running on all cylinders. But I think Notre Dame, regardless of the outcome, has a good shot, if everybody can stay healthy, to have a shot at the playoffs. If you handle business, of course, you guys don't have, like, I know a lot of people like outside of Notre Dame pick at Notre Dame's schedule, but this year is not that year. So
yeah, I mean, it's loaded for sure.
Yes, like you said at the beginning of the video, BYU, Clemson. I mean, like, it doesn't get any easier after you play in this shoe.
Yeah. So you talked about Ohio State, being wealthy on offense, and I agree. But you also don't just replace two top 15 first, picks in the draft, between Olave and Wilson. And I think that Ohio State is going to be much better later in the year, which is why I think when Notre Dame beats Ohio State, Ohio State is still going to make the playoff.
Okay.
Just because I think that they're going to get a lot more used to the way Knowles is going to run his defense, and the playmakers are going to emerge more.
Okay.
I think just losing those top, so we know the known commodity. I think that is in Notre Dame's favor, and that's why I have Notre Dame winning 31 and OSU scoring 27.
There it is. Ohio State fans, Notre Dame fans, get in the comments. Let us know what you think the game score is going to be and what the keys to the game are going to be. We want to appreciate Christian for coming on, man. Of course, we'll probably have him back. Definitely probably for that Clemson game, or even I definitely want you back for the BYU game. I think that game is bigger than everybody knows about it. It's going to be played in Vegas. Oh, my goodness. It's like you couldn't even draw up a better college football atmosphere. So thank you for coming on, man. For Christian, this is Coach I, Fat Act. We out of here.
Later.
We got it jumping like it's that valley. I call my dogs out the pound, let's go eat. Turn on the fanatic, let's have a debate. Who really hold down the Southeast from state to state? What team hungry gonna eat everything up off their plate?